Good evening, my friends. This is VJ Franz K, Creative Tech, Performance, Reviews, and Tutorials on YouTube and other social media. Tonight we are discussing an important new subject, the arrival of the Ableton Push 3. It's not just a control surface, it's now a standalone music creation device. You might say it is a recording studio you can bring with you in your backpack. And it's incredible. It can be a replacement for a laptop computer for making your own electronic music, hip-hop, or really any style that you would want to make. The sky is really the limit with a modern DAW, and yet a lot of us have been interested in so-called DAW-less performance, not connected to a conventional computer, but instead using a drum machine or other user interfaces to really get back the feel of something being a musical instrument rather than something that is inherently part of a recording studio. So let's get into this right now. We have the Ableton Push 3, the same size as the Ableton Push 2, which was just a controller. The Ableton Push 3 can function as just a controller as well, but it can also run in standalone mode, which is amazing, and it is something that me and many other people have wished for years. A perfect integration between Ableton Live, which is our favorite DAW, digital audio workstation, but then to be able to perfectly take with you your sessions that you have recorded and designed at home, maybe with your large studio, maybe with other instruments that you don't want to bring with you to a show because there's too many of them or the setup would be too complicated. Maybe they're vintage instruments, they're fragile, they don't really travel very well on the road. This device can hypothetically do that, assuming you're not using too many of the certain plugins, but basically it can. It is much easier than other earlier forms of taking a track on the road, you might say. It is a large control surface designed to be set on a table, primarily, or a DJ stand. You could also hold it in your lap. It seems to be fairly light, actually, and rather thin. It does include a battery. Excellent. All devices, I would say, now should include a battery. We want to be able to go wherever we want to record or perform our music. A lot of the things that I've done with my synthesizer racks, such as the Manta Ray, the idea of being able to make electronic music as mobile as any other form or style of music that you have out there. There are a variety of other devices in use to do this type of thing. Up to this point, I will mention, most obviously, MPC Live 2, a portable version of their music production center. The thing that the Akai does have that the new Push does not have is an included set of small but fairly loud monitor speakers. And yeah, they do sound fairly good, even though you're obviously not going to do a real performance with them. But you could be in a room and interacting with other people, getting their opinion on your beats as you're producing them. Want to sketch out an idea? Any convenient place? A machine which I've been using a lot lately, Synthstrom Deluge, which is a very sort of tactile device with a lot of buttons. It's an arranger. It's running its own custom operating system, which is very low latency and high fidelity audio. A lot of people have been talking about the SP404, which I have been considering getting into. It is another portable drum pad sort of device. It is popular in lo-fi hip-hop and other similar styles of music. Some people are using it for sound collages. I really like the portability of this unit, but as they say, it is fairly limited, and the user interface, I've tried to learn it and it is very different from all of these other machines which I know, so I find it difficult to use, and that is why I've hesitated to purchase one up to this point, but I may try it again later. Back to the Ableton Push 3, of course. A roughly square device. It is fairly thin. It has these amazing pads, and these pads are an improvement over previous generations of the Ableton Push, most other pads out there, because MPE data it records more data than earlier MIDI standards. So they're not just pressure sensitive, they're location sensitive. You can move your finger on the pad to the left or to the right, up or down, influences the sound. You can bend the notes up or down, so you could create performances with a lot more subtlety than a conventional controller. I'm really looking forward to trying this, and I know I'm going to purchase one of these at some point. It's just when rather than if. The cost may be considered high, $2,000 for the standalone machine, but they have the very nice option, $1,000 for a controller-only Push 3. The wonderful thing is that you can purchase an upgrade kit, which allows you to add the internal processor, battery, and memory to transform the control surface from just a control surface into the standalone unit. It does come with the Ableton Live Intro version of the software, which is limited by a certain amount of tracks. And if you have the Ableton Live Suite already, as I do, you can authorize your Ableton Live Suite to run on this new device. That's an interesting way to handle things, I guess. You are able to use the Wi-Fi that is built into this device. You first use it to authorize, but then you use it to load in the samples from their server, perhaps sample packs that you purchase or that you download for free, including some that I may make for you. Consider becoming my Patreon supporter. You use the Wi-Fi to interchange sessions with your Ableton Push 3 standalone and your Ableton Live desktop program that is running on your PC or Mac. So you are able to interchange the sessions, and provided that they are within the workable things, they should move across that barrier without having to reformat. And that is another thing, that is one huge advantage if you are a user of Ableton Live in your studio. The sessions are transferable across that barrier, because so many times I've used these other devices and I'm used to using my other drum machines and synthesizers and mini recorders, samplers, these type of things, voice processors, all of these. But then you have to reformat the audio that you have recorded into an Ableton Live session. You have to get everything right at the right tempo, make sure that warp markers or other arrangement is correct. And that does take a little bit of extra time and reduces the spontaneity. The spontaneity here could be at a premium level, because you wouldn't have to rebuild the session every single time. I am really looking forward to being able to do that. It is also great that I could take the Ableton Live 3 to my friend's studio, and then we can record some of the instruments that they would have, bring it back to my studio for the final mix with my favorite monitor speakers and all that. Yeah, it's a wonderful possibility. It does include an audio interface, which is of course necessary to function as a standalone performance instrument. It'll be interesting because most of my devices do not have a very expressive play surface interface. I'm using buttons and sequencers and that type of thing, like playing the surface of a percussion instrument like a drum or something, or a guitar. I don't play stringed instruments, but I know a lot of people who do, and I frequently collaborate with them. It would be interesting to hear how I might play a guitar solo on the surface of this device, maybe using one of their new MPE-enabled synth plugins. The best way to get a guitar sound is to record a guitar, but there are many sounds that a synthesizer creates that a guitar cannot create. If you're using a synthesizer, you might as well explore that very unique sonic territory. All kinds of things, including FM synthesis, which is having a resurgence in popularity, as well as granular synthesis and other granular sampling, rearrangement, all of these things. It's a great time to be an audio artist, I would say. You don't even have to call yourself a musician, because what you're making may not fall into the category of music, sound design, or even ambient music, or it may be noise, experimental. As the 21st century continues, we may discover some new category, sound that we like to listen to, that no longer falls into the category of music. Music is usually something that you listen to, and yet the idea of really interacting with the music in gaming situation or even in virtual reality, which I am now fascinated by, means that the music could be perceived differently by the listener every single time. In fact, the music might be reacting to the listener in various ways, or the visuals. I am still a VJ, even though I spend a lot of time talking about audio tech, as you might have noticed, but I'm still very interested in the way that visuals and sound come together. And that is one other weakness of this device. I don't think it natively supports a screen. It has a built-in screen, which is a narrow sort of rectangular thing that goes beneath the buttons and knobs and reminds you of what they all do. But I don't think it allows you to have a standard Ableton Live view of the track for the arranger, but also either using Max for Live or other plugins, we VJs do a visual show using a combination of homebrew technology and apps like Resolume and Modulate, Touch Designer, things like that. Being able to do that on this device is probably not going to happen because it doesn't have a dedicated video out, even though USB-C does support the possibility of having a video out. So you never know if they might add that as an update later. But that is my unusual perspective as a VJ as well as a musician and vocalist. Speaking of vocalists, can use one of the two line ins. That's very nice. So another instrument going into that second input could be good for bands. Maybe you are the producer of the band and you have someone else is singing and playing an instrument. Be able to process or sample or loop their sounds. A lot of us have been using standalone looping devices like the RC505, but with Ableton Live, loopers are included as an audio device. It may be that a lot of live loopers, such as myself, start migrating to using the Push 3, just because it not only does looping, but it also does so many other possible things, drums and other instruments, which are available. And so it does run Max for Live devices, write your own extensions, original sounds, your own things that only you would come up with or are just custom to your needs as a performer. And that is incredible, the possibilities, and there are huge range already of Max for Live devices that exist currently, though they may or may not be compatible with this Surface just because they need their user interface to fit within the small screen. That might not work. I myself am not a Push 2 user just because, I don't know, I always enjoyed using my other user interfaces, and yes, I wanted something that was standalone. And also, I just had a feeling that Push 3 was going to come along eventually. I mean, it seemed like it was an obvious idea, but also, for a portable device, it is fairly large. Bringing to shows or even doing what I sometimes do, I will carry it around my home, just working on things anywhere that I choose. I might go outside and record any field recordings. I might walk around with it at a performance, just have it all self-contained. And for that, this new generation of smaller devices like the 404, like the Deluge, MPC Live is right on the edge of being too large to be considered portable, I would say. It's a matter of opinion, and you get used to it. Most conventional wooden instruments are heavier than these devices anyway, but there's a big difference because once you get used to playing your guitar or whatever, you don't have to look at it. Whereas with all of these devices, almost every synthesizer, groovebox, drum machine, or such, you have to look at the device. At least some percentage of the time you need to look at the numbers, the screen, or whatever to understand what you're doing. Yes, I wish it were a bit smaller. Who knows, maybe they will make a small one in a few years for the people who are really into portability, but I have a feeling I will just have to get used to carrying around a larger device. What you perform with is what you get used to, Our ability to learn new interfaces is a valuable skill. But at the same point, when designing a user interface, you also want to meet your users halfway. You want them to be able to figure out as much as possible without having to look at the manual. You want their first guess of how to use it to be the correct one, if at all possible. Go along with conventions of things that are known. And many of us that have been using DAWs for years, including Ableton Live, obviously, which I've been using since version 1.0, I could tell that it was amazing from the very beginning, and I got on board fairly early. Then, yes, I did take a while focusing on my DAW-less drum machines and other groove boxes and devices, but I would always come back to Ableton to make the recorded version anyway, to make the mixdowns and do some mastering on the tracks like that. So in the end, I had a feeling of inevitability. Everything comes back to Ableton eventually. So now that has really come true. Fascinating. Yes, they include CV possibilities. You can use the foot pedal jacks. They can also become CV, so you can interface with your modular system or other devices, maybe vintage devices that have CV. That's great because so many people are exploring the world of modular, which I'm going to do in the future. I'm going to get into modular audio, but also, of course, modular video, which is an amazing new frontier for VJs and video artists. So that will be interesting. The battery life. Apparently, it's only 2.5 hours of playtime. And some people have said that it could be shorter if you're using a lot of processor power. Relatively short, but I would say that since there is a USB-C, thank you for a standard power plug on the back, you would perhaps get a high quality power bank and just extend that 2.5 hours if you have to by using that power bank. You can replace the battery, possibly upgrade the memory, and possibly upgrade the processor, which is really impressive. It is a nice gesture for future proofing or for allowing repairs if something should happen to it. They will perhaps allow an upgrade path in future. Yes, it's a great thing to have, and every high-tech device should have battery power, should have upgradability, should be user serviceable to some degree, just so you don't have to always go into the store or shop. It should have standard connections on here. It does have MIDI on the back. The only thing I don't like is that it has these micro-sized connectors instead of the conventional DIN MIDI that we're all used to from the classic days. I like the sturdiness of that traditional MIDI jack, and so I wish that they were here, but it is only one small adapter away, so... Oh yes, okay, so we do have a dedicated conventional power supply. ADAT, in and out connection, that's nice. You aren't limited to just those two inputs. You can have multiple inputs by connecting it to an interface that has more simultaneous inputs at your recording studio, a home studio. I think that many people will start to use Ableton Live in a set as if they were DJing. If you make your tracks in Ableton Live anyway, it makes sense DJ them using stems or other things like that, so you have that higher degree of mix control. I think we'll see a lot of people with one of their CDJ turntables on one side and then maybe Ableton Push 3 on the other side. So maybe it'll be a standard where people will bring a USB stick with their live projects and just bring that in. It's good that it has repeat, where you can select using the side buttons the speed that it will be repeating at. 1/16 are these other note values, and I hope there's a way to easily get it up to 1/28 notes and other things for mix that repeat with the MPE, and I think we're going to get a really amazing bunch of performances coming from that. Once you get used to using the repeat in your play style, that is an important feature. Many devices have not included this type of thing, the quantization of the input, but it is very important, and I would call it a necessity for the way that I play. I'm always asking for it on devices. It's good it's here. It's ready to use. There's also that touch strip on the side. It will be so fascinating to see what we are able to do using the MPE and the pads, different kind of performance that is more nuanced than what was possible before. In summary, the Ableton Push 3 is a new device which can be used as a control surface for Ableton Live, but it can also be used as a standalone instrument, and that is a brand new feature, which I am looking forward to using, and many of you will want to do also. Fairly large compared with other portable devices, but that is to give you more space to play the large pad grid and to look at the screen. It is relatively light and portable. It does include its own battery, which is great. Instantly, it becomes a prime contender, although it is a highly priced contender with other devices, so that may make your decision for you. Other devices that may compare to it are a bit smaller, and so may be considered more portable, but none of them have up to this point had absolute integration with Ableton Live, even though MPC does have its own software which runs on computers, so you can interchange your sessions back and forth there. But for Ableton Live, you do have to convert those sessions over, and that ended up being more complicated than I expected. You don't preserve all the editability and these other things when you transfer over from an MPC. So if you have been using, like I have, Ableton Live for a long time, maybe the longest possible time, is an obvious choice for continuing your Ableton Live experience. You know, I have my favorite drum machines here, including this Electribe ESX, which I still think they should make an Electribe 3 in the style of the Electribe ESX, because that is a sort of legendary playability there. These other devices that I like to use, I could put them side by side with Push 3, record the parts in for a session, or sync them up via MIDI. If you have a favorite other device, it doesn't have to be a replacement for that device. It can be something that works alongside that. They clearly have planned that. Seems like a lot of thought has gone into the user interface, and that is good. That's so important, because the thing is, everything is now competing with the ease of use of mobile apps such as Koala Sampler and Korg Gadget Beatmaker. If I was starting out doing music today, I could just make an entire album on my phone and export it. It's entirely possible. It's just I don't like to do that because I like the feel and the complexity of all of these other things to use, but that would be the fine way to get started at this point, to see if you really want to invest in these other devices. And it's true, when you have a dedicated device like the Ableton Push 3, it is essentially a Linux computer running the Ableton Live software, but it doesn't have email, it doesn't have social media, and all of these other things to distract you while you're working on your music. Thank you for watching this review. Eventually I will have a video with a real Ableton Push 3 right here, and we can talk about it. This is VJ Franz K signing out for tonight. Please subscribe here on YouTube as well as on Patreon. And you can see me on basically all other social media. My account is always VJ Franz K, which is my name, Franz, and VJ, which stands for Video Jockey, in case you're wondering.